What is up, guys? Team Yugi Fails here with another video, and I know I'm a few days behind, almost a week behind actually. I think on posting a video. I've been pretty consistent for like the last year. I just had a super busy week. Every time that I wanted to record something, something came up, and then of course we got a ban list on top of it, so I had to like scrap ideas that I had and change things around. So now we get to start off the new format with me posting a deck profile that I personally hold near and dear to my heart, and that is Salamangreat. For many people watching, if you've been following my channel long enough, you'll know that I've had a pretty large amount of success with this deck. This deck I've played a ridiculously large amount of back in 2019, like November of 2019. I topped 4 at a regional with this in Orchest format, which is crazy. There is a video for that, but obviously it's outdated because we don't have that format anymore. But at that point, it was a very difficult matchup for Salad. Now, not as much, but now you get to see the evolution of Salamangreat into the new ban list, in which we got some cards back that are going to definitely help us out. So that's really cool. So we're going to jump into the deck profile, but before we do, make sure you guys go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on so you know when I upload more cool videos like this, and then obviously give the video a thumbs up too if you enjoy it, because you know, when I see those thumbs up, I know that I'm doing something right and I'm showing everyone some pretty cool stuff. But that being said, we will not hold you up any longer. Let's go ahead and take a look at the awesome deck profile. Alrighty, so we're going to start with the main deck per usual. You know, with the I guess you'd call it the release of Salamangreat Mirage Stalio from the ban section and being moved into our limited section, we now have definitely a different way of playing Salamangreat. We have an extra disruption for our opponent. That way we can kind of break their board a little bit, which is pretty cool because Stalio is a free bounce, which is fantastic. So I have to basically take everything that I have learned about playing Salamangreat in the absence of Mirage Stalio and throw it out the window because Stalio is back. So let me go ahead and start with the monster lineup. Now, some of this is very subjective. You can change things how you'd like, but looking at the way that the deck is going to kind of form itself, this seems like the proper thing to do. So we have 3 copies of Foxy. Prior to this, we were only playing 2 because Parallel Exceed was the route that everyone was going. Now with Mirage Stalio being back, I actually don't even play Parallel Exceed, and I think a lot of people are also starting to do the same exact thing. So I think that 3 Foxy is correct, though. It's obviously a way to get into your Mirage Stalio more easily, but it's also a pot of duality for the deck, which is pretty important, believe it or not, being able to get that nice extra search. So Foxy does have a very large amount of use. The fact that when you special it from grave, you can pop like a face-up spell and trap in your opponent's field too is also pretty crazy, because they can't effect Veiler it because it's part of the summoning effect that pops. So that's actually very important. We have 3 copies of Salamangreat Spinny. Spinny is kind of just a 1-card combo, to be perfectly honest with you. I love Spinny. Spinny does some really cool stuff. It just basically gets you into some plays where you're like, wow, this is actually pretty sweet, you know, because it's a free Sunlight Wolf. That to me is very valuable. Free Sunlight Wolf means that we can play the game. Then, of course, we play the 1 Gazelle because it's limited. I wish Konami had brought this card back to more than 1. A lot of people, I feel, look at this deck and they think that cards like Gazelle and Circle can't come back to multiples, but honestly, I think they could, because the thing that I love about this deck, it sounds so stupid, but the thing I love about this deck is that it's so good at being underrated that it's actually a pretty good deck. Every single person looks at this deck and is like, wow, like, it's just Salamangreat, it's really not that good. And then, like, in the hands of the right player, it's like a Burning Abyss deck. You just don't know how to play against it. So Gazelle coming back to more than 1 for me would be fantastic. For some people who are just learning how to play the deck, it probably wouldn't change much. Then for the level 4s, I just played 2 Jack Jaguar and 1 Falco. I think that this is correct personally, I don't think that you have to worry about these getting banished from your graveyard very much, to be perfectly honest with you. I really think that the Jack Jaguar's recursion is going to be extremely important for your Mirage Stalio. Being able to constantly just put it back in your extra deck and use it the following turn is absolutely fantastic. So the Jack Jaguar has a very, very large usage there. Obviously, it also can shuffle things back like extra Sunlight Wolves, which does come up pretty frequently. You're going to have to do that. There's going to be other cards that you want to shuffle back too. Then the Falco has the multiple effects as well, in which when it goes to the graveyard, you can set a Salamangreat spell or trap. That one doesn't come up super frequently. It comes up typically when you make Dweller, and you have like Salamangreat Circle engraved, because then you can detach the Falco from the Dweller and you could set Circle, which is pretty cool. But the biggest effect for Falco that pops up is his bounce to special summon. So there are going to be times where like you just want to bounce your Gazelle back to hand to special summon the Falco from grave, and that's actually something pretty cool. It does come up if you open up just Gazelle. You can do that. You can normal the Gazelle, send the Falco, bounce the Gazelle to summon the Falco, and then summon a Balinx. You would do Balinx Chainlink 1, Gazelle Chainlink 2, and then you would still be able to go into a Sunlight Wolf, which is pretty sweet. So definitely some good stuff there. Then we play 3 copies of Flame Buffalo. No debug. I don't play debug. I don't think debug is that good, to be perfectly honest. Like, obviously the card is good, it's a search, but I don't think that it's going to be extremely helpful right now. I'd rather get a bunch of like Cyberse monsters into my graveyard like Foxy or Spinny. That way I can continue to do some really crazy plays. So I think the Buffalo is good. Obviously drawing 2 cards is fantastic too, so we could draw into the Salamangreat cards that we're looking for, or just more interruptions or hand traps that we would need. So Buffalo is definitely important. You want to play 3 of him. Then the last like main deck engine monster, I guess you could call it, or extender, would be Sea Archiver. I just play 1 copy. I don't think you need multiple of this. There's a point, I think the regional that I actually ended up getting 4th at back in November 2019, I think I was playing 2 of this, and now I wouldn't play 2. Back then, obviously, playing 2 was ideal, and I think I was playing 2 Mirage Stalio on that list at that point because it was still at 3. But now, obviously, with it at 1, I don't think that it's super necessary to be playing multiples of this. I just think in general, you don't need to play multiples of this. The 1 does what it needs to do. Moving on to some hand traps, we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom and 3 copies of Ghost Bell for the Ghost Sisters. I think that this is going to be pretty standard. A lot of people are going to be playing the Ghost Sisters, specifically these 2, just because they're very, very good against most of the meta. The Ash is generic against basically everything, but the Ghost Bell is very, very good against a lot of the meta, and I think that that's going to be something that comes up a lot, especially against Drytron, against Eldritch. It can come up against Zoo because you can do this on their Revolt, which is really crazy. So Bell is actually kind of powerful. You could do it on Invocation if they don't have Meltdown up too, which is also pretty nice. So definitely a lot of things that you can do. Obviously, you can use Bell on stuff like Called by the Grave as well, DD Crow. I could go on with an entire list, but I won't do that. But the other hand trap that we play is 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. So the 3 copies of Imperm is so important because things like Tri-Brigade are still going to be running around, and if you can negate their effect on field after they've paid the cost to banish, then your Imperm becomes ridiculously powerful and probably wins you the game. So 3 Imperm is definitely the route to go. That way you kind of cover all bases as far as the meta goes with your hand traps. Those are all the hand traps, though. We're going to move on to the rest of the deck. First, we will start with the spells. We have 3 copies of Signet Mining because it is very, very good to be able to search cards and put cards in your graveyard. So I feel like this doesn't need a lot of explanation. You can discard any Salamangreat and then search for a Gazelle, and then you could special the Gazelle, which is nuts. Absolutely nuts. The Signet Mining is definitely a necessity at 3. You want to play 3 of this card, and it just basically gets you where you need to be in the deck, which is obviously building advantage and finding your Gazelle. Then we play 2 copies of Will. I always want to play 3 of this card typically, but there was one card that I felt I wanted to play one of, which we'll get to. It's the last spell card that I'm playing, but I wanted to play one of that, so I said, you know what, we can play Will It too, and chances are it's going to work just as fine as if it was at 3, because we can still dump it off of Gazelle if we need it. So the Will is perfectly fine at 2. Then for the last 2 cards, we have the 1 Circle and the 1 Sanctuary. Obviously, the Circle is crazy in this deck, really, really crazy. So the Circle will just get you whatever card you need for your Salamangreat strategy. And then additionally, the second effect can come up. It doesn't come up a lot, but there are occasions where you'll like be in a situation where you look at your board and you're like, you know, I think I don't want my opponent to use any kind of monster effects to impact my Salamangreat monster, so you use the second effect. Doesn't come up as often though. And then the Sanctuary is just obviously fantastic, because Sanctuary, you're going to go ahead and be able to do your Reincarnation Link summoning, which for the Salamangreat strategy is a very large part of what the deck does. So you definitely want to play the 1 Sanctuary, but don't play multiple. When the deck first came out, people were playing multiple, and it was so bad. It was really, really bad. Then we play 3 copies of Potted Desires, because it's another card that says draw 2 cards, and anything in this deck that says draw 2 cards is pretty powerful, I'm not going to lie. So Desires doesn't need a lot of explanation, and because we're playing so many multiples of almost everything, Desires usually doesn't hurt you ever, which is also a very big benefit, the fact that you can kind of play worry-free. But if you have the chance to search a Gazelle beforehand, obviously search the Gazelle beforehand. That's kind of common sense. I think most people would know that, and if not, I would have to do a whole entire video on how to properly play Yu-Gi-Oh, which for some people they definitely need it. For other people, they understand what I'm talking about right away. But the last spell card that we play, that we opted to play one of in place of the 3rd Will, was 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. Just in case I run into a bunch of back row matchups, I wanted something to clear it out. It's also an out for Mystic Mind, which that can come up now, because I think Striker is just going to be a deck that a ridiculously large amount of people play. That's another thing that Ghost Spell hits. You can Ghost Spell the Kagari when they try and add their Engage back, which is kind of cool. I think DD Crow is better, but I feel like a lot of people right now are really, really high on Ghost Spell, so I just wanted to showcase that. Obviously, like I said, you can change everything around how you find it to be fit. That's, you know, your preference. Do whatever you want to do. I'm just here to give you guys a skeleton of the decks. But back to Feather Duster. Feather Duster is fantastic against any kind of big spell trap deck. I feel that goes without saying. Everyone knows that. That's what you want to do. If you drop this against Striker, they're probably going to lose or scoop. If we drop it against Eldritch, they're also going to be in a very bad position. Obviously, there are other decks that this is going to be good against too. I'm just using those as the examples here. But some people are playing Striker Eldritch too, which is kind of scary. So keep that in mind. You could completely blow them out of the water, which would definitely ruin their day. Then we play for the traps 3 copies of Solemn Strike, because Solemn Strike is still probably the best trap right now as far as interruptions go. You could play this card going first or going second, and it's going to do amazing things regardless. So Solemn Strike, definitely worth playing 3 of. This card puts in a ridiculously large amount of work. And the last cards that we play are the Salamangreat traps, which would be 2 Rage and 1 Roar. I don't think you need to play 2 Roar. I think 1 is okay. You could even like cut this down, and you could play the 3rd Will, or you could play another card that you want to play. You know, like let's say you want to play DD Crows. You can cut 1 Ghost Spell and 1 Rage and play 2 DD Crows. So you have options if you want to do that, but I also wanted to play 9 trap cards, so I opted to just play the 2nd Rage. You also have the option of cutting one of this for an Imperial Order, because Imperial Order is also going to be really good this format, just as it was last format. But that is the entirety of the main deck. We're going to go ahead and hop on over to the extra deck now and take a look. Okay, so now we're on to the extra deck portion of Salamangreat. I think that the extra deck is probably fairly standard. There's not an excessively large amount of weird picks in here. I think everything makes a lot of sense per the meta, and I'll explain most of it as I go, per usual. But let's start off with the Salamangreat monsters. We have 3 copies of Salamangreat Balinks. This card also got a huge price spike recently, which was kind of cool. I didn't expect it, but these are like $5 to $6 now, I think, if not more. Card's really, really good. Obviously, it's a Link 1, which is, for the most part in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, a very, very strong thing, because every single Link 1 is just nuts. It does so much work. So the Balinks obviously gets you to your Sanctuary too, which is fantastic. So playing 3 is a necessity. We have 3 copies of Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf. Sunlight Wolf is really, really good. This is the card that you're most of the time going to be ending your first turn board on. It's just a card that allows you to not only recur your resources, but it also allows you to use something like Salamangreat Rage, which is the trap, one of the traps, this one, to target itself and then pop 2 cards on your opponent's field, which is really, really powerful. That's actually, you know, very strong depending on the deck that your opponent is playing. If they're playing back row, you could also do the Rage in the end phase and pop 2 of the back row that they set, which is very strong. That's like super, super strong. So keep that in mind. Sunlight Wolf, just overall, really good card. You'll shuffle this back into your extra deck off of Jack Jaguar fairly frequently as well. Then we play 2 copies of Salamangreat Heat Leo. This is probably the least powerful of the 3, but that being said, it's still a very strong card. Heat Leo not only outs back row, but if he is link summoned by reincarnation, meaning basically you're going to use himself as one of the link materials, you can then target a monster in your graveyard and a monster that your opponent controls, and your opponent's monster then becomes the same attack, or I'm sorry, just a monster on the field. That monster that you target becomes the same attack as what you targeted in the graveyard. So there's going to be times where you can target one of your opponent's big monsters and drop it down to like 0 attack because you have an Ash engrave. Or there's going to be a time where you have like a Gazelle on your field and you have a second Heat Leo engrave, and you could make your Gazelle become 2300 by targeting a Heat Leo, which could possibly push for game at some point. So Heat Leo is good for you not only to boost your monster's attack, but drop your opponent's. There's multiple things you can do. Then for our other link monsters, we are playing 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix. This card being made alongside a Sunlight Wolf is very strong because the Sunlight Wolf can't be destroyed by card or by battle. And when you have a Sunlight Wolf that can't be destroyed by battle and a Phoenix that can't be destroyed by battle, this actually came up at that regional. I remember that regional pretty vividly. I had a guy who swung at the Sunlight Wolf with I don't remember what he swung at it with, but he swung at the Sunlight Wolf, and then I told him the attack declaration was good, and then he was like, damage step, and I said, yes, damage step is fine. And then after that, he's like, okay, your Sunlight Wolf is destroyed. And I said, no, it's not, because Nightmare Phoenix is co-linked with the Sunlight Wolf. And he actually had to pick up Nightmare Phoenix and read it. And it's not like it was early, it was like late rounds. That was like round 6 or 7. So, no, that was round 6. So that's actually really cool. But the Nightmare Phoenix just comes up for back row, and obviously to make it so your co-linked cards can't be destroyed by battle. We play 1 copy of Splash Mage, which Splash Mage is really good to get you in your access code combos. It just basically gets another Salamangreat or Cyburst monster. Usually it's going to be Salamangreat because we play so many of them, from your graveyard onto the field, and then you just, you go off with your Link Summon into your transcode, and then transcode summon back the Splash Mage, so on and so forth. Then we play 1 copy of Update Jammer, because this card is also really, really good. It makes your access code basically swing for over 10,000 damage. Very strong card for that reason. So the Update Jammer is fully worth it. And I'll also show this alongside it. The transcode is obviously what you're going to summon this back to then link back into the access code. But there are going to be some times where you use the Update Jammer and another monster to link for the transcode, and you bring back the Update Jammer, and this by itself is over 8,000. So that's also another option. So keep that in mind, that having a transcode and update co-linked when this can attack twice is still game, but usually the access code is the more common play. Speaking of access code, we have our 1 copy. An access code is obviously a card that's also spiking in price ridiculously right now. This card is very, very strong. and the fact that your opponent can't chain to it is also ridiculous. This card is being played a lot in Sky Striker as well. Obviously, it's being played in a lot of decks, but Sky Striker is going to abuse this card, especially with something like Selene running around. They can just summon a Veiler back out from grave with the Selene, and then they can make access code, or they can link the effect Veiler for a Link Karibo, and then they use the Link Karibo and the Selene to make this, and then they have another pop with the Link Karibo by banishing it with access code Talker. So access code is really, really crazy this format. Then for the Xyz monsters, we play obviously the one copy of Mirage Stalio. This card is pretty disgusting. I'm not gonna lie. Not only do you get to special summon a Salamangreat monster from your deck, but you also have the lovely opportunity to bounce one of your opponent's monsters, which is pretty cool. This would come up a lot during Orcus format because people would summon Thunder Dragon Colossus, and then it would be hard to destroy. So you would just summon a Mirage Stalio, link the Mirage Stalio into a Sunlight Wolf, and then you would just bounce their Colossus, and they literally couldn't play. It was pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie. I used to love doing that. I used to make Thunder Dragon players so mad, but this card's really good for multiple reasons. The other thing to mention too about Mirage Stalio, it does lock you into fires, but that's okay because turn one, you don't have to really do much other than use your fire monsters, so I wouldn't even worry about that being an issue. Then the last card that we have in the extra deck is the one copy of Abyss Dweller. This card is going to come up pretty frequently, most likely. I think that typically most of the time, Dweller comes up in a lot of metas because so many decks are graveyard oriented that you just kind of want to play Dweller if you can. So this deck does an excellent job of turboing out Dweller, which is fantastic. And then obviously you can set up some back row on top of it to kind of help out with your Dweller. So that is the entirety of the extra deck. We're going to go ahead and hop on over to our side deck now and talk all about the ways to counter the meta with your side deck. Okay, so we're on the last portion of the video, which is our side deck. Now, the side deck for Salamangreat is very interesting. I think it's interesting because we have some cards, or we have one card anyways, that will be siding to go first. But then the rest is basically siding to go second, or, obviously depending on your matchup, you do what you gotta do. So we do have some more hand traps in the side deck. The first one is Ally of Justice Cycle Reader. Ally of Justice Cycle Reader is excellent against Drytron. This card hurts Drytron so much. There are going to be like some other decks that you'll like randomly see maybe at a local level that play a lot of light monsters that you could also use this against. If people are playing Dragon Link, you can actually banish things like their Starly Seafort, which is pretty cool because Seafort actually is very, very strong. So Cycle Reader can be good against multiple decks, but not a lot of people are going to be playing an excessive amount of light decks other than Drytron. Then the other hand trap that we side deck is 3 copies of Artifact Lancia. Obviously, I don't have to say an excessively large amount about Lancia. I say it all the time whenever I show this in the deck profile. This card is so good against so many decks right now. It's very, very good against Tri-Brigade, which is, in my opinion, probably going to be the second best deck in the format. It's also good against things like Invoked, because they can't use their Invocation to banish their Alistair from grave or field, so that's very, very powerful. So you could just fizzle their Invocation, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. So it's obviously, like I said, good against a bunch of other decks too, but we won't go super in depth with that. That'll be for another video. Then this one's very, very important. Moving on to the spells, we have 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. Droplet is very, very important right now. Unless you can't afford it, then you play Dark Rulers, obviously. You need something to shut off boards, and this card really does shut off boards extremely well. The great part about it is that this card currently in this deck can send a lot of your Salamangreat cards from your deck to from your hand or field to the graveyard, which in some instances is actually going to turbo your strategy out even further. So it's going to help you out a whole lot as far as getting the materials into grave that you need in order to accelerate your plays to a point where your opponent can't even try and counter you. So Droplet definitely is worth playing if you don't have it already. Then back row removal, more of it. We have the Feather Duster in the main deck, and we are now siding the Twin Twisters. Twin Twisters is really, really good because, once again, just like Droplet, it gets your Salamangreat cards into grave that you need in grave. That way you can continue extending, and you don't really lose out on sources because you're going to be able to recur them. And the last card is for when we go first, when we know we're going first, and that is 3 copies of Different Dimension Ground. This card is ridiculously strong against the 2 best decks, which are going to be Drytron and Tri-Brigade. And if you play against anything else that's graveyard oriented, this card is also going to be good against those decks too. So overall, this card outs just about everything you could want it to out. It's going to go ahead and counter a bunch of decks that typically need to have their strategy rely on their graveyard. And when you cut off the graveyard for an entire turn against a deck that really needs it, they're just going to kind of like half-ass summon a monster and then pass their turn because they're not going to have anything else to do. So for that reason, I think Different Dimension Ground is fully worth playing just to counter the meta. But that essentially brings us to a close with our Salamangreat deck profile. I think going forwards that this deck is not necessarily going to be like tier 1, but I think that if you learn how to play this well enough, just like any deck, you will outgrind your opponent. You'll be able to figure out ways to break their board and obviously break their spirits. That's the big goal. You just want to walk away with the win. You don't care if they're happy or sad about it. So, you know, I think that overall there is a lot of potential for this deck in the upcoming meta, and I look forward to seeing what it does. But if you guys enjoyed the video, obviously, as I said in the beginning of the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell on so you know when I post more cool content. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I think we're at like 745. We're making our way up, so if we can make everything blow up on my channel, that'd be pretty cool. But other than that, give the video a thumbs up and comment down below what decks you're excited to play for this upcoming format. And for right now, this is Team Yugi Fails signing out.